my friend John Fancher started this thing called Sunday Dinner with John and Jay at Outta Space Bar in Berwyn, Illinois. And we had been part of a church experiment, which it was great, but it came to an end. And John had this whole idea, and John and I have been talking about things for a long time. I think church, as typically experienced by most people, is well past its expiration date. Furthermore, I think we got to rewind to about 200 AD and start over. I think we got to push a reset button on a whole bunch of things. I think we need to reconceptualize the whole entire thing. And so this was not something that I was wanting to go do myself, but John did, right? So it's like, all right, I'll help you out. So he starts this thing called Sunday Dinner with John and Jay. And so it's at a bar called Outta Space at 6 o'clock on Sunday nights. And the food is free and the drinks are free. And it's about 2 hours. And John gives a talk. He has a musician. And then we have open mic jam time. You know, what's interesting is my kids like come to it, which I didn't really know, expect, design for, or anticipate. But like, it's genuine, it's authentic. And, you know, like, people do need a spiritual meetup point. You know, we were just not really happy with all the other ways that you could try to do it. And so we invented our own. And we're not saying this is the way to do it or anything, but it sure seems to be working. I find it to be a great Renaissance time kind of a thing. You need to feed your soul, and you need to get together with other people and break bread, and that's what we do. And you know, you need to have honest conversations. So like, John does not give the artists really any particular direction about what he wants them to do. But you know, the musician yesterday, he talked about how he's been in a recovery program for the last 2 years, and he was rather candid about talking about that. And well, okay, so everybody has permission to show up and be their real selves and not be pretentious. Well, so I think everybody ought to have some kind of environment like that where you can just come and be you. I'm a pastor's kid, and I didn't really like church very much when I was growing up. It was very heavy-handed, and it was so boring. But as I got older and kind of came to understand things and got a little more educated, I found a place in my life where it fit very nicely. And then, you know, as part of multiple different communities for long periods of time, they all eventually had various catastrophic failures. And I got to this point where the way I would describe it is, you're driving a truck on a gravel road and it turns into a dirt road, which turns into, you know, 2 dirt tracks going through the grass, which turns into grass, which turns into no road at all. And then all of a sudden you hit a fence and you got to get out and walk. And so now you're walking through the tall grass in the meadow and you have no road map. And, you know, maybe it's raining a little bit and the wind is blowing, and like, this is where you are. Well, that's where church is for me. And that's where I think faith is in general in the 21st century. It's not invalid, but I don't think the old roadmap does the job anymore. We have to first of all, get back to a much older roadmap. And secondly, we have to reinvent other parts of the roadmap entirely, because we're in an entirely different world. Like, retail's been reinvented and the stock market's been reinvented, and, you know, the taxi industry has been reinvented, and everything's being reinvented. And nobody is immune. It's like John Mendocha's saying the internet is a serial killer and nobody knows who it's going to take out next. I think one of the most useful things in the 21st century is the demilitarized zone. So there's a strip of land between North and South Korea, and nobody can shoot, and they have a little building and they can have meetings between the people, and it's a perfectly good illustration because you have this communist dictatorship on one end, and then you have this free market on the other end, and somehow they need to meet in the middle and they need to talk. Well, we need this in a whole bunch of areas. We need this in all the different political spheres where people are arguing and fighting. We need it in the space between science and religion. We need it in the space of people who want to be spiritual but don't feel like being religious. And so that's kind of what the whole Sunday dinner with John and Jay thing is. I started talking about the demilitarized zone in my evolution project, and the rules are: put down your weapons. You can't hide anonymously behind screen names. You assume positive intention on the part of the person who you're disagreeing with, and get to the truth, not the sale. Like, whatever the truth is, we're trying to find out what it is. We're not trying to push the agenda. And we need a safe space where people can do that. And so that's exactly what John's created. It's like, well, you could be Christian, you could be Buddhist, you could be agnostic, you could not know what you think, but you're safe here. Nobody's pushing something on you. But we are going to try to, as John says, help orphans and widows into their distress and be uncorrupted by the system. It's like polarization is almost like the word of the year, right? Everybody's talking about it and nobody likes it, but the world is systemically creating it. Now, the reason why is because social media selects for psychopaths. Okay, that's why. Okay, so if you want to have a meaningful conversation, you have to have a very deliberate plan to sit down with somebody and actually listen to them, right? Sit down and have the beer. Everybody needs to do that. And they need to do it with somebody with whom they disagree. Can we have amicable disagreements instead of nasty disagreements? I think a lot of people they have excess energy and they have excess mojo, and they're burning it up arguing with somebody instead of burning it up doing some productive, creative, original activity that's actually going to move the needle in the world. Demilitarized zone really came into focus working on the Evolution 2.0 project, which was when I dived down the rabbit hole of, okay, so where did we all come from? And what about this whole evolution thing? And I was raised a 6-day creationist when I was a kid, and like, how do I make sense of all that? So I went very, very deep down this rabbit hole, and I read thousands of scientific papers and hundreds of books. And what I came to the conclusion was the science around the subject is one of the most contentious disciplines I've ever seen. I've consulted in 300 industries, and I've never seen one with more politics and more fear than the whole evolution conversation. I thought, what if this contentious issue, which is like, it's right up there with abortion, gay rights, gun control, immigration, what if this became an exemplar of how to have a civil conversation? What if it actually became the example of how to do it rather than the example of not how to do it? And so I came up with the rules of the DMZ, and I found that there's valuable things to be learned from every different faction that I've encountered, even the ones that people think are kooky. If people see the world through a fisheye lens, they're going to see things that everybody else missed. even if there's certain bizarre tendencies. And so I started seeing that when you have interdisciplinary people who learn to talk to each other, and when you can have conversations that encompass multiple disciplines like science and engineering and physics and chemistry and theology and history and philosophy, when you can actually get more and more of those fields to talk to each other, you start having very useful conversations, and you start being able to be much more discerning about what you incorporate and what you leave out. I would say most of my biggest insights in business have come from nature, not even business. And that would never happen if I hadn't learned to go into these other worlds and speak these other languages. So I've got a friend named Emerson Sparks, and he's a polymath, and I think he's 32 or 33. He's independently wealthy, and he spends all of his time just learning, like just indulging whatever curiosity he happens to have. And he made this really interesting comment. He said, whenever he goes into a new field, and he starts digging around, all right, who's the experts and how does this work? He'll spend like 20 hours reading all this stuff, and eventually he'll find somebody who makes more sense of everything that he's learned in 1 hour than all of the previous people did in 20. Doesn't find him at first, but somewhere, oh, here's that person. They can just explain this so effectively, and it just leaps him forward. He said, what I've always noticed about this person is they are what I call an interdisciplinary explainer. They are knowledgeable about multiple fields, not just one, and they have figured out how to explain everything they do in plain English instead of industry jargon. Well, when he said this, I realized that all of my best mentors in my life have been interdisciplinary explainers, every single one of them. And that's essentially my definition of a Renaissance man or a Renaissance woman, okay, is somebody who, they might work in this field, but they can relate it to these 3 or 4 other fields. And what happens is, if you've done it like 2 or 3 or 4 times, at least twice, you can do it again, you can do it again, and you can do it again. And you get faster and faster at picking up the patterns. And what I try to cultivate in Planet Perry is a culture of interdisciplinary explainers. So think about a mastermind group that we have. You have people in a dozen completely different industries all talking to each other in a common language, right? So that the accounting firm can advise the herbal company, which can say something to the marketing consultant who can do something with the banking company, that all business is really underneath. It's all the same. It all operates on the same set of principles, but in different guises, in different industries. And so you get that cross-pollination again, which is absolutely essential because ideas always come from the outside. Ray Kroc was not from the restaurant industry. He was a milkshake salesman. And Larry and Sergey, when they started Google, they were trying to model references of scientific papers. And FedEx, the guy that started FedEx wasn't from the shipping industry, and Uber didn't come from the taxi industry. So innovations always come from the outside, and they're always resisted by the insiders. And so it's like, how do you become an insider and an outsider at the same time? The only way to do that is to be an interdisciplinary explainer, or a Renaissance woman, or a Renaissance man.